So this is a 2023 release that just came out on Max, starring Tilda Swinton and writer director and starring in Julio Torres as Alejandro. Julio Torres, who I didn't really know before this, has done a lot of TV. He was a writer for SNL for like 8 years. Has a two TV shows on HBO. This is his directorial debut, and Julio Torres plays Alejandro, who's an immigrant from El Salvador, I believe, and he works at. This story is kind of a sci-fi story as well as kind of a coming of age thing, but he works for this cryo sleep company, where an artist played by RZA, yes, RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan, who plays this artist who finds out he has terminal cancer and decides to freeze himself, and then leaves his widow, played by Tilda Swinton, to come up with the funds to keep him frozen, to be thought out sometime in the future. Very kind of bizarre setup. Alejandro has to balance a lot of things. He actually gets fired right away from this cryo sleep company, and his visa will lapse, and he will have to be deported if he doesn't find a new sponsor. This is where he runs into Tilda Swinton's character, Elizabeth, hoping to help her do a show, sell the paintings, earn the money to keep her husband frozen, and also sponsor his visa. He's also just having to deal with the money and kind of the catch-22 nature of the system. For instance, he needs to earn money to pay the lawyer, but he's not allowed to earn money while he doesn't have a visa, and so he has to end up taking all these shady cash jobs on Craigslist. This is also set in like the 2000s, 2010s era, so all the technology is about 10-15 years older, so he's having to balance all these things, and it's a funny movie. There's a lot of kind of supernatural sequences, or like, things in your brain. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of everywhere. Zach, what do you think?
In the review for Problemista, a slate called Problemista, a hilarious twist on the American dream. And I think that's mostly true. Being an A24 joint, Problemista is going to be relatively grounded, but also pretty high concept. And that's what we get here. In its best moments, it reminds me a little of something like Everything Everywhere All at Once. In its worst moments, it reminds me of like Nicolas Cage's dream scenario, right? Like it's a world where everybody is pretty much grounded, but the ideas that we're dealing with are uniquely huge. And Julio Torres' character, Alejandro, is uniquely positioned here as a toy creator who wants to make toys that are derivative of what already exists, right? He doesn't want to make an all new thing. He wants to make a snake in a can that has a little sign that says, "Sorry, I scared you." He doesn't want to make a new American Girl doll or Barbie. He wants to take a Barbie that already exists and cross its fingers and put it behind it, so it's like it's never really being honest. Like he wants to create toys that teach kids about a world that is the same as the one we know, but has a different perspective and a different personality. And that extends to much of the film because this is based very much on Julio Torres' life, as far as we can tell. Coming up, Julio Torres is vegan, like Alejandro, is gay, like Alejandro, is an immigrant, like Alejandro, and lived in New York taking Craigslist jobs, like Alejandro. All of that seems to be very, very particular to the world that Julio Torres inhabits and extends to their other works like this show they have on HBO, Phantasmus. Andy's right. Julio was an SNL writer. I did learn, fun fact, I think the most notable sketch that Julio Torres wrote is Papyrus, the Ryan Gosling bit. Yeah, that's wow. A Julio Torres joint. I know, yeah. So when you think, boy, who came up with this as an idea? That's who we're getting this from. And what's amazing, I think, about Problemista is the scale of it, because there's a lot of people involved in this that see the potential that Julio has, like, and what's coming down the pipe for them. Like, this is obviously a first-time feature from an up-and-coming director, up-and-coming writer who's got a lot going on. They have an HBO special. Tilda Swinton is in this feature. A24 has produced it, even though it is their first. It's his first feature. They're all in on him. Like, it seems like things are going well in the world of Julio Torres, but the world of Alejandro could not be more complicated. And I do think, uniquely, that if there is one thing that makes this movie a bit of a tough watch, I think it's its pacing. I think it is slow in times when it doesn't need to be slow, and the jokes don't quite land in the places they need to. Maybe a rewatch would be a better angle on it, because I do think it's unique. I do like this world. I do like what Alejandro is doing in it, and I actually really like Tilda Swinton's like absolute stress ball mess of a character. Good God, she's hard to deal with. But also, like, I just think it's a tough watch, and it's a little long in the tooth in places where it doesn't need to be. And I think part of that is because it's so personal, and because it's such a dedicated thing that Julio's working on in writing, directing, and starring in this film. Boy, that felt like a really, really long answer, Andy. I'm really sorry. Where do you want to pivot here?
Yeah, I felt like it. Again, he's a sketch writer largely, and that's what this feels like. This movie kind of feels like TV, in a lot of ways, and like it doesn't fit together as a whole. But there's individual sections that are funny, that are entertaining, like the bit about Craigslist, and there's this like There's a guy who he's literally credited as Craigslist because he's like He's Craigslist come to life, and he's like, come do this disgusting job for $5 an hour in cash. So there's things like that that are funny. It just, yeah, the pacing is off. It's a little bit too long, and it ends twice. It's got that Return of the King problem. This should probably be a hot 90 minutes, and it's a little bit longer than that. I think it had a lot of potential. Tilda Swinton's character is just this hurricane of a personality. She can never be pleased. She's always yelling at everyone. Julio Torres is the opposite. He's very kind of reserved, very meek. He's kind of a pushover, bit of a people pleaser, and they kind of eventually, they bond and they learn from each other throughout the film. Yeah, it's a little bit too long, and the pacing just doesn't. I agree, it doesn't quite work.
I think it works really good on the page. Like, I remember seeing the trailer for this and being wildly charmed just by the opening trailer, because we have the story of this artist mom who works in El Salvador, I believe, and has a son who she loves, Alejandro, and he goes out into the world where he meets a big scary monster, right? That's bad, and he wears blue and the monster wears red. And this is vision she has of her son. And then we flash forward to Alejandro, her real son, not going into the woods to fight a monster, but moving to New York City, where he's an immigrant and he's gay and he's vegan and he's broke and like cannot get a job. And like, he's so meek and he's such a pushover and a coward. And it's so funny because the world just walks all over Alejandro. And then, of course, Alejandro meets Elizabeth, Tilda Swinton's red-clad, fiery, wildly stressful individual who desperately needs a personal assistant because she wants to continue leading her lavish lifestyle and having her estate in Maine and going to art things, but she cannot keep up with the technology and trappings of the modern world. She desperately needs a personal assistant. She freaks out whenever she's on the phone. She tells people they're screaming at them when they're not. Like, she cannot hold it together. She's about to lose her mind at any second. And she is a ticking time bomb in this movie in every scene. And Alejandro is forced to kind of like reckon with that. But rather than see Elizabeth for this evil monster that everybody else sees her as, like his toys, like the world in which Alejandro resides, like he sees her as something unique and special and different, and honestly, maybe a force for good in places where a little pressure may need to be applied. Like maybe that will inspire Alejandro in his life and in the things he does. And like, I think there's some really cool lessons to be taken from there. I uniquely, for a time, worked as not an assistant, but a producer on a radio show for a woman that is kind of a lot like Elizabeth. And like, it was stressful just watching her bits, because I was like, oh God, I remember this person in my life who was like this. So like, they pick up their phone and they like tap at it with their finger really sharply, and they yell about things randomly, like just like a grenade at any one time, landmine of a person. Like, will freak out for anything. We'll start yelling at somebody over nothing. Like just a monster to deal with. And seeing her and Alejandro like bounce off each other is definitely, I think, the meat of the feature. Like that's where you're going to get your most enjoyment, is watching these two. But it does also alternatively make for a watch where you have somebody who's very quiet and not very talkative and kind of is just a punching bag for the whole movie, and Elizabeth, who is difficult to watch because she's so aggressive and such a nightmare to deal with. Like it makes for an interesting tightrope to walk for a first feature, for a first time director, I think. And I think that's where a lot of our pacing issues come in.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that I think do work. Like the overall setup and plot, I think are strong. It's a strong idea. We have very strong characters, but just our through line, our kind of development, everything just kind of gets worse and worse for Alejandro throughout the whole movie. Like he's struggling with money. He eventually has to rent out his room and sleep on the couch to try and make ends meet. It seems like it's never going to really turn around for him, and there's lots of conflicts. Of course, she has upset a whole lot of people. Greta Lee makes an appearance in this, which is fun. I did like the look of and feel of the city, because it feels like New York City, not like the Hollywood version. It's like everyone's apartment is small, it's cramped, everything's like busy and bustling. It's like from the perspective of someone who lives there.
Yes. And like alternatively, I like what the movie has to say about the idea of low art and high art. Like nobody ever says it. Like we see a ton of art galleries featuring statues and paintings and wonderful ideas in mixed media that all look very abstract and all look very weird and all look very strange. And then meanwhile, like the thing Alejandro wants to pursue, like getting a job at a toy factory and producing their own toys, like are these like odd, unique reflections of toys that already exist. Meanwhile, like Elizabeth's art, her husband's art that she's trying to sell, is like so uniquely wrote. It's these like egg paintings that all look the same and don't mean anything, and they can't get anybody to look at them because they just don't care. And I think the movie has a lot to say about how you perceive art and how people perceive your art and how you're willing to put a piece of yourself out there, a piece of yourself into the things that you make, and understand that the criticism that may come back from that may feel like a reflection of you or your loved one or the people who made it, but it isn't. Like, and that's not the way to look at the world, that everybody's unique, that everybody's different, that everyone's got a story, right? That everyone comes from somewhere. Like that like emotional heartstring that runs through this is strong and feels good. And I think it has a lot to say. It's just over an hour and 44 minutes, right? And like, that feels like a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely does.
I did want to talk about briefly this other thing, this framing device of this imaginary fight between Alejandro, like a knight, and Elizabeth, who's like this Hydra monster character. It's a visual they cut to a few times, and it's solid, and it's low budget and like costume department in the way that like I think is charming. It's effective filmmaking. Like I think it's if anything, I think the only problem in those segments is maybe like better lens choice, better lighting. Otherwise, like I think they work fine. I think it's creative. It's a good visual way to show Alejandro having this kind of like metaphysical fight with this like chaotic force that he struggles to understand and work through so he can get what he needs to get his visa to immigrate. Like it's a whole thing. But like I do think that works good. For the most part, I think this works fine. I think Andy's right. Like I think it's just a little long. Just a little long in the tooth. I think that's its biggest crime.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And that's Problemista. Any other thoughts or recommendations, Andy?
I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Problemista?
I say it's perfect for streaming, which it's already on. You could find it on Max. I had to watch it in two parts because, like I said, just kind of gets a little slow. But there are a lot of funny bits. There's a lot of good issues that are brought up. Like it's talk about issues of identity, of immigration, the struggles, also art, and a little bit of sci-fi. You could see a lot of Torres's sketch writing in this. Sometimes it feels a little bit more like TV than film, but I think it's a really good start, and I'd love to see what he does next.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think it's a good start. I think it's probably a strong start, especially considering like the studio involved in this and the people involved in it and the talent that's like involved in this project. Like clearly everybody sees the potential in Julio Torres, and like having seen none of their previous work, this being just the first one that I jump into, like I see that potential too. And though this project may not be like the perfect reflection of what's possible in the mind of Julio Torres, like I think this is a really great start, and I'm looking forward to what they do next. And that's Problemista. Glad we watched it. Actually, a double feature for A24 this week on episode 259 of Off Script, Andy. Both A24 features.
Look at that. Look at that.
Doesn't happen every day. What are we watching next week?
So next week, big weekend in horror. We're going to be watching Longlegs, which is the long-anticipated horror movie starring Micah Monroe and Nicolas Cage. We don't really know too much about this other than it's a little bit like Zodiac, David Fincher's film from the 2000s, which is a detective on the hunt for a serial killer. And this is been very terrifying, or it's been described as terrifying. People are like, it's changing my life. This is so scary. So we're going to try to temper our expectations, but that's going to be the big one. And then we're also going to be taking a look way back to 1996's Twister, starring Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton. And we're in anticipation of Twisters, the kind of spiritual sequel that comes out on the 19th. Also, FYI, release Fly Me to the Moon, the rom-com starring Scarlett Johansson and, man, I'm blanking on the other guy's
Channing Tatum. Channing Tatum. Yes, of course.
Channing Tatum. In the rom-com of Going to the Moon, he plays an astronaut. She's a marketing person who's got to sell the moon to the American public, so they're continuing to get funding. That looks like a fake movie. I think that's probably going to bomb. And also upcoming, again, Twisters on July 19th and Deadpool and Wolverine July 26th.
Dude, Fly Me to the Moon does not look like it's going to make a lot of money, and I feel bad because, like, I love ScarJo fine, and actually I think Channing Tatum's pretty solid too. Like, good comedy chops on that guy. It just doesn't. It looks like a fake movie. You're right. Like, it looks like it doesn't even look real. It's the weirdest thing. Meanwhile, like I think, Longlegs is gonna be a fun time, and I never saw Twister, singular. Yeah, I never saw it. So excited to check that out. I know it's a banger. It's one of those movies you'd like say at a party, hey, I never saw that movie, and somebody would be like, you never saw Twister? Like, one of those movies.
yeah.
The Matrix or Star Wars or Indiana Jones, right? Like Twister was a cultural institution. I'm excited to dig into it next week. If you want to dig into it with us, find out what we think of Twister or that movie Longlegs coming down the pipe, keep up with movie news, all the usual stuff we do on the podcast. Best way to do that is just subscribe to Off Script. Subscribe to Off Script Film Review on your favorite video or audio platform, wherever you're checking us out right now, and we will get that new episode straight to you every single Tuesday when we do them, of course. We're available on YouTube. You can find episodes of Off Script, individual reviews, clips, lots of big things going on YouTube. Come sub over there. Check us out. Things are growing. I'm telling you, things are happening over there. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the usual social media places. You can follow us there as well. Rate, comment, review, subscribe, like, follow. The social media things that you do. We're on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartMedia, Amazon Music, I think, is where you can listen to the show. So if you're listening now, shout out to you. Love our listeners. We appreciate you guys. And, of course, you can check out our website, offscriptfilmreview.com. You can mail us correspondence directly from you to us, from fan to creator, subscriber to publisher at mail@offscriptfilmreview.com, our official email address. From all of us at Offscript, the home of bold cinema, I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Thanks for watching.